to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
I'm your co-host, Rich Gear, here with you as well. And I think we got kind of an exciting show here today. Hopefully it'll be interesting for people out there. It's very current affairs right now, what's going on. What do we want to title the show, Lord? To vaccines, to be or not to be, huh?
Yeah.
Something like that, huh?
I'm going to title it, Should I Get the COVID-19 Vaccine?
Yep.
And the reason I wanted to address this is because I saw a very good presentation on Creation.com, which is a Creation ministry out of Georgia. And they're actually originally based in Australia.
CMI?
CMI, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And so the reference I want you to point you to is creation.com/RNA-vaccines. And they have done a real good job of presenting both sides of this situation and giving us a good analysis of the vaccination issue. And there's a couple of different sides to this.
Yeah, and I guess we should start out with saying there are arguments on both sides, and whatever side you come down on, be at peace with yourself, be confident in the Lord, and go with that. But we want to present the arguments. We'll give you both pro and con here, but we'll tell you truth in lending. We'll tell you which side of the aisle we fall on as far as what we think is what we ourselves will probably end up doing based on the information we have. So, Doug, Dr. Robert Carter and Dr. Jonathan Sarfati, were they the CMI guys that you were talking about?
Exactly. Yes.
The presentation. Okay.
And both of these fellows I've met personally, and Dr. Carter actually I've had some extensive talks with personally.
I've read Dr. Sarfati. He's a neat guy. Yeah.
Because they have they're geneticists. At least Dr. Carter is. Dr. Sarfati is really a well-rounded creation guy. He's
he's the one. What's the one that he wrote these several books on the basically destroying the underpinnings of evolution. I can't remember the name of the
right,
what was the name of that book? There's two of them, at least two of them. Might have been three of them, but the basic tenets of evolution,
the icons
of evolution. That's my brain just went blank there for a second. Thanks, Doug, for helping me out. But icons of evolution, and he would go one by one and just mess them up and just basically show how they're the weakness and the flaw they are. He's very good at that kind of stuff.
And I have people that I highly respect on both sides of this issue. And so the question actually has to do with how much risk we want to take and having a vaccine introduced into our body that will jumpstart our immune system,
right,
and have it recognize the COVID-19 virus. And let me explain a little bit of how vaccines work.
Okay.
There's things called an antibody, and which is a wonderful design mechanism that our body has to rid our body of foreign substances that really don't belong there.
These are things I always think about, Doug. Just a side note, whether these antibodies existed before the fall. But I would expect maybe they did, but whether it was needed or they worked better. But even after the fall, these things help us in a fallen, broken world where a disease comes in. It's something go in the cell. It'll actually come in and create. It's the white blood cell, I guess, or whatever it is. You go into more of it in more detail. It'll attack foreign bodies.
Doesn't have anything to do with the white blood cell.
Well, no, with the white, but there isn't the. Well, see, I get them confused. There's the T cells and there's the white blood cells. What's the one that comes in there that does immunobodies or immune things?
Well, they all do work in terms of your immune system.
And that's what gets me a little.
But an antibody, what an antibody has is a variable. It actually manufactures a equivalent of the invading body. That it'll figure it out, what this looks like, and then it'll attach itself to it. And and it has a lot to do with the weak bonds that I have in my book.
Oh, okay.
And what it does is that there's hydrophobic, hydrophilic bonds, there's ionic bonds, there's covalent bonds, and van der Waals bonds, and
all toxin bonds. No, a different kind. Okay, sorry.
but these things they make a pattern, and it makes a pattern again, and it'll manufacture a sequence that's equivalent to the opposite of the sequence of the invading body. And so it sort of figures it out. There's intelligence involved in this, which is really amazing. And so if you, and what they have done with the vaccines is they've actually done a DNA blueprint of this protein that's on the spike of the COVID-19 virus.
Yeah, so if you see it, looks like a giant underwater mine with these things sticking all out of it. Everybody's kind of seen the pictures of them now. So,
and so what it's done is taken a little piece of that spike part of
okay.
And so then the antibody will recognize that, and it'll attach itself to that the virus and pull it out of the body. And that's what it's doing is it'll jumpstart that mechanism so that if you at first when you're getting sick, it's because your body is starting to react to this virus. And
yeah, when I've gotten flu shots, every once in a while I'll start feeling pretty nasty for sometimes up to a week, but normally it's usually a day or two. I feel kind of bad about it. So that's the other thing, Doug. I'm looking at this, and maybe it's because of the speed with which the vaccine was developed. There's been fears over it for several reasons, but vaccines have been proven. We've not been that afraid of it for 100 years. I mean, I remember when the smallpox vaccine came. I don't remember it, but I mean, studied about it when that first came out. People were afraid you'd turn into a cow, or you get a version of smallpox. They inject cowpox into you, and it would create the antibody to fight off smallpox. And we've had polio vaccines, and we've had vaccines, all kinds of them, and we've never been really that afraid of them. But for some reason, Doug, it seems like people are kind of afraid of them now. You know, and I guess that's we're maybe not there yet. But
what they're really afraid of is that it came about so quickly. But you have to understand is that the people who are manufacturing these vaccines already have this whole mechanism in place back in March. They were able to identify the COVID virus, get a blueprint of this spike using a DNA blueprint machine, and they had a vaccine way back in March, and so they were starting to test it right after they had found it out.
So explain to me, Doug, just shortly, a virus is not technically alive, right?
Right.
And what is it composed of?
Well, it's composed of DNA, some RNA, usually it's RNA, and proteins, and it has a sort of mechanism where it invades a cell, and then it will usually the viruses have originally a good purpose. The only thing is that they're mutated.
Okay, but I guess the point I want to get, you were talking about they made a DNA blueprint, but if it's made out of RNA, I'm a little hazy on it.
Well, there's DNA, RNA, and proteins in viruses.
Okay,
but they need a host cell in order to propagate.
Yes.
And so that's how they reproduce, is that they co-opt a cell and then use the cell to multiply the cell thing.
Okay.
And usually what the viruses in the original design of things are to get rid of bad cells. They're scavengers. They get to they carry out the function of scavenging and causing cells to die.
It's like there's good bacteria and there's bad bacteria.
Right.
Most people know that now, but to hear that there's actually good viral, or maybe are all viruses bad today though?
No, that's not
even
the
some are still good. Okay,
Yeah,
so that's good to know that.
In fact,
I wasn't aware of that.
they're co-opting the use of, in some of the earlier vaccines, they co-opt the use of viruses, the good viruses, to carry out the vaccine.
Well, I've been enlightened because Doug, I had no idea there was such a thing as a good virus. I thought they were all bad. I knew about good and bad bacteria, but viruses were all like evil, you know. But now you're telling me that's not the case.
Right.
I mean, I understood before the fall, things could have been good and been mutated into bad things, and you're saying probably now the bad bacteria is a result of that.
Yeah,
anyway.
that's theory. We can't go back in time
Correct.
and figure that out.
That's true. Yeah,
but we can speculate that may be what had happened. Is that we have the good original creation that God put together, co-opted, and it is actually when you have a bad virus, it's creating things that are poisonous, and it causes cell death. And so I do want to bring up that there are some people who are proponents of anti-vaccination.
Before that, I do want to, you have a little note here, I think it's very good. We were talking about, we've been in favor of vaccines in the past, and it has a good Christian history. You know, Lister and Pasteur were believers that really, and they were immunology was really these people.
Yeah, they pioneered the rabies vaccine.
Oh yes, correct.
I think it was Pasteur.
I think it was Pasteur. Yeah.
And so you know, there's a good history. We have you know, smallpox and with the cowpox vaccine. Cowpox, I think, mimicked the smallpox.
Yes, that's what. Yeah.
And then we have the polio, which is highly successful, and it's and measles, mumps, whooping cough, diphtheria, tetanus, all these, and now shingles, I think, has a vaccine. We had one vaccine that wasn't as effective as the second one, but unfortunately, the vaccines aren't foolproof. And like the Shingrix vaccine, I think it was Jerry Bergman's brother-in-law that died of anaphylactic shock.
Anaphylactic shock?
Yeah.
Anaphylactic. That when you have an allergic reaction and your body kicks in. See, I guess, Doug, and I think there are valid anti-vaccination arguments out there. I'm not saying they're all of them not valid. What I'm saying is that life is a risk. You know, and I'm not saying to be willy-nilly and be cavalier about the fact about the risk involved, but the fact is, if this whole life is that way, and you're going to have to weigh the decision of whether this is a bigger risk or a smaller risk. And we're going to give you some of the anti-vaccine arguments, but I've always think, look, if life was no risk, if we didn't want any risk in our life, we wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. And even then, we might die in our sleep. You know, you
risk driving a car.
Drive a car. Why not? You know, well, it's safer to go. I have people say this. Oh, it's safer to go 25 miles an hour than 75. I said, well, yeah, it's safer to go 5 then. It's safer to go 1. Why don't we ride a bike? Why don't we just walk? I mean, everything we weigh risk, reward, potential for good things happening is greater than the bad, and I think that's what we're talking about with these vaccines here, Doug. Is the risk reward? In other words, if we don't have to have America shut down anymore, if fear is eliminated from people because they've taken these things, or they feel that it could help them out, then the risk that there are going to be some people that might get anaphylactic shock. There might be somebody that is allergic to a vaccine. That's going to probably happen, Doug.
And there's people that may get the COVID anyway.
And they may get the COVID anyway. You got an example.
Yeah, there's a friend of ours who they went and got both shots, and they got two shots, and they got COVID anyway.
Yeah.
And so this is a pro-life issue. You know, we have people dying, and if there's something that prevents people from dying. And it's by jump-starting the immune system, So that it's waking up the immune system, and it's going to start manufacturing these antibodies in your body so that they are able to recognize a COVID virus once if it actually ends up in our bloodstream, and so that is that's what it's all about, and so. And there's some misconceptions about the vaccine.
Yeah, I want you to talk, Doug, a little bit about. There's a lot of fear out now, and this is not really whether the vaccine is efficacious or not, but whether the vaccine is derived from things that people would have a moral aversion to having it. For instance, aborted fetal cells, and aborted baby stuff.
Right.
Is that used in the manufacture of the virus? These are things that people would object to on a moral basis, even if it worked. And I'm saying, I think that you wrote some pretty good notes down here about that, and it sounds like you're pretty far up on that. So you might want to tell our audience about that, because I think some of the stuff I was reading kind of alleviated a few of those concerns for me.
Right.
Okay.
So what it is, there's two that are approved right now. Did not use the fetals. Did not use
Moderna and Pfizer.
Pfizer. Those are the two that I know of that are approved right now, and there's other ones that are coming up. And then AstraZeneca is the kind that uses a virus to inject the RNA into the cell. And it only includes one or two coding genes. It cannot just start a wave of infection. And the trial on the AstraZeneca was halted when one volunteer got ill. Well, that was cleared up and the trials got resumed.
Was it, see? Okay.
But Pfizer and Moderna have developed competing vaccines that use a different delivery system than a virus. So it's not even using a virus. What they have done is that they've encapsulated messenger RNA in droplets of lipids, which are fats.
Fat cells, yeah.
And what it does is that these fats are ingested into the cell when they bump into it. And so what happens is that it pulls it in like it's food. Then that discovers there's this messenger RNA in there. It makes this little protein, and then the antibodies react to the protein that's made from it, and it says, "Oh, this is not something that belongs here," and so people get a little antsy about having artificially manufactured RNA or DNA ingested into a cell, but if it doesn't get into the nucleus, it isn't going to affect anything.
Get ingested or
it just gets into the cytoplasm, and that's where it gets discovered by the cell's mechanisms, and it manufactures the antibodies, and it gets rid of it. And so that's what it's all about. And if you have a free-floating RNA sitting in our bloodstream, it's quickly taken apart and reused. And when they make the messenger RNA, there's 4 nucleotides that are used: adenosine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine.
Cytosine, yeah.
So those are for DNA, and then in the RNA is uracil that they use instead of I think it's cytosine that it doesn't have. But what it does is that there's 4 nucleotides, including uracil, that's in the messenger RNA, and uracil, when they manufacture the vaccine, they actually make a different conformation of the uracil than what is used in life, and so it can't work as to manufacturing something that's useful.
So in other words, it goes in and it helps create antibodies, but it in and of itself will just break down and,
Exactly,
and be
yes.
thrown out once it's done, once it's created the antibodies, or,
And so
or cause the antibodies to be
these
created.
people who are understanding how the body works really are using a very intelligent way of doing this, and
Okay.
it's mimicking the intelligent design of our cells and co-opting it so that you have a way to trigger the manufacture of these antibodies.
Yeah, I just think
And
it's
so
always,
when the antibodies are out there and a real COVID virus enters in, it's already sitting there armed and ready so that you're able to get rid of it, and the first line of defense is already there.
okay, so to the anti-vaccine argument, made from fetal cells, that's not true.
Not true.
And that it'll basically mutate or do something inside your body to cause all kinds of adverse reactions. That's not true.
Right.
Okay.
Now
All right.
there's another thing is that
All
the technology to do this was already existed at the time the COVID was first sequenced, and the vaccine was created using a DNA synthesizer, and so they already had the technology ready in place.
Way back in March, you said.
Way back in March.
How do they know about that, Doug? Or was it for other reasons?
Well, they've studied this for years.
This virus?
Yeah,
This particular one?
they studied. This is very similar to the SARS virus that came out years ago.
Okay, that's what I've heard. Okay, so that makes sense to me. All right, I was wondering. So they're because of virology or whatever they call it, study of viruses. They've already had things in place, and when this came along, this wasn't really something that out of line with what they already knew about, is what you're saying.
That's right,
Okay,
yeah.
I got you. Okay.
Now, we really don't understand what might have been going on in the lab over there in Wuhan.
Wuhan. The
So-
Wuhan flu. Yep.
And so but once that the COVID virus was identified, it was then sequenced, and then they had already, because they've been making vaccines all along
Right.
for other things, they use that same technology to make the vaccine for the COVID.
Okay.
And so different companies, and they've poured billions of dollars into
Billions of
these.
dollars. Yeah, I know.
And and so now that they're authorized for use, we have to ask, well, how did the trials go for? And there were about 60,000 people in each trial, and about half of them getting the placebo. And so
So about 30,000
yeah.
were placebo and 30,000 got the real stuff. Okay.
And so it's been adequately tested from both
Okay.
both ends, and so they put it on warp speed, like what they talked
Yeah.
about.
It was. Warp factor 9, you know?
Now, I did want to mention there's a guy by the name of Dr. Andrew Wakefield, and he's the primary anti-vaccination proponent.
Okay.
And this was back in 1998 or something like that, where he suggested that the vaccines for measles, mumps, and rubella were causing autism.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that. Okay, so
Yeah, and so he now there's a couple things that worry me about this. Is that first of all, with the way information is being disseminated nowadays, it was very hard to find any information on this at all on the internet.
really? That's surprising.
And then when I did find stuff, it was all very much negative towards Dr. Wakefield, and so
It
that
was
was
anti, right?
yeah, and so it was as if we're seeing it through this filter of the internet that I couldn't actually look up directly what he would say about it.
Sure.
And so it was.
Is he still alive?
Oh yeah, he's still around,
Okay.
and he's still anti-vaccination, And the thing that he was objecting to was that the original vaccines used mercury and aluminum to manufacture them.
Okay.
That's not true for the COVID vaccines, and it's not true with the current versions
Of rubella and
right.
okay, so they've changed all that too, yeah. Because I know they had the old thalidomide babies and
Right.
you know all kinds of stuff. Babies born with no arms, and we heard all the horror stories. So,
But if you want to hear the other side to this, I would suggest that you try to find his videos or whatever he has about. Actually, there was a movie that came out in pro Wakefield was it's called Vaxxed.
oh really?
And that I think sort of brought about his perspective and how he was persecuted
Sure.
by
Yeah.
the
Okay.
medical establishment. It was more of a conspiratorial type of approach that was taken with this movie, and so.
Well, you know, it's not any worse than what I keep hearing. Everybody yelling about big pharma these days. Everything's conspiracy. You know, just depends which side of the aisle you come down on. Which one's the bad one?
So
Conspiracy.
there are
I don't
people
know.
that I highly respect on both sides of this issue, and so I'm not. If you choose not to get the vaccine, that's your prerogative. I think that there's a lot of things to consider about that. If vaccines are actually helpful, and you refuse the vaccine, but then you get COVID, you spread it to somebody else.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things.
Of course, if they've been vaccinated,
in that too.
if they've been vaccinated, you shouldn't spread it to them, right?
That's right.
Well, so only the unvaccinated people might get it. But you know what the problem is, Doug, is that there's also a lot of people who are asymptomatic, who maybe even they have COVID antibodies. And this is the way it is with all viruses, Doug. I mean, in some respects, some people are just not, they're not going to get that sick. And we see that even with the COVID virus.
Well, that's the other thing is that if you remain healthy and if you take care of yourself and you don't have extenuating circumstances, then you're going to be a lot less likely to get COVID than somebody else. Fortunately, neither you or I have gotten it yet, and so I think.
No, but my son and daughter both got it.
Yeah.
And they got over it. You know, they got it both. They said they were sick for about a week. They weren't terrible or achy. Dan lost his sense of taste and smell. And this was way back in March. He got it, and my daughter got it back in early November, I think, is when she got it. But they find, and neither of their spouses got it.
So
Isn't that weird?
So I would encourage you to take a look at this issue. Take a look at both sides. Don't do this lightly. But it is a pro-life issue, and it's a moral issue. And we hope you enjoyed our show tonight. We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.
Bye now.